You are listening to Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, episode 110, Helping a Friend. In today's episode, I talk about the changes coming to the show. More details will be inside the episode, so continue listening. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me today is no one. I don't have Jared joining me today. Just this week, I had a conversation with Jared, and although it's painful to say that he just is not enjoying doing the podcast as much anymore. He's been having a lot of things going on with his life right now, and it's just become a real drain on him to kind of sit down and do this commitment of using the platform, the podcast, and producing the podcast and being part of it. And the commitment's just too much. He feels like he doesn't have any free time beyond this, and I understand that. And that's kind of the whole point of this episode. The episode's titled "Helping Out a Friend." I've known Jared since we were 5 years old. I've been there with him as we've grown up. There's been many different things that have happened throughout life, and this is just another one of those things. When we started the podcast 2 years ago, we talked about, we wanted to do this for fun. We wanted to share our gaming insights with a community of people and see if we could, broaden the community, give more insights to a deeper gaming group. And I think we've done that. I think that we've been able to provide that. We've had interactions with different listeners. We've been able to meet some great people along the way. And, I really appreciate that we've been able to do all that. I think he appreciates that too. But I think that as the years have gone on, as we got into the second year, over 100 episodes of doing this podcast, I think it started to become more of a chore for him than it was fun for him to do. I could kind of sense that in myself when I was talking with him. We went through it, and that kind of came from different sparks of what he was thinking and kind of what was going on. So because this is just too much for him, he's going to step away from the podcast, and I will be continuing the podcast myself. And so because we're going into a solo format, I will kind of move and reformat the episodes. We'll come up with a new kind of style and structure for it. I'll be able to muse on a subject. It won't be as much of the dialogue back and forth with Jared, but I can at least, think about what, I think about a subject and be able to give you my perspective on it from in a longer format. And what I'll probably end up doing is, or what I'm thinking of doing, is I would probably try to maybe evolve this to be able to talk with some other people and some other friends I have, maybe, seek out and find some other interviews and things to be able to give other perspectives from other DMs that are out there as well. So I send Jared all your best wishes. I still see him every week. I still will be able to talk with him every week. I'm hoping that I'll be able to still reach out to him, pick his brain if there's something that you wanted to ask him, but from a podcast format on a weekly basis. He just won't be joining us anymore. And again, this is where, like I said, the topic is helping out a friend. And, we've mused on this several times in the podcast before, which is that, gaming's a shared experience with friends. Or at least for most of us, it's a shared experience with friends or loved ones. I mean, if you do this with your children, I know, gaming groups come in all shapes and sizes. Even if you're doing it with people who you barely know online, you're still doing it with people who are there to have fun and to enjoy the experience with one another. And so it's really important that, you take into consideration their feelings on different subjects, and that we make sure that everybody is having fun. The goal is to have fun at the end of the day. You wouldn't do this hobby if it wasn't enjoyable. You wouldn't spend your resource of time and your passion of that you have for the hobby. You wouldn't do that if you weren't getting something out of it, if it wasn't providing you some level of joy or benefit or enriching your lives. And that's true for anything that you do in the world. There's times that I'm sure you probably waste time sitting in front of TVs and your phone and different things. But this is a very deliberate hobby. It takes effort and planning from a GM perspective. It takes not just time to sit down and play from a player perspective, but it also takes effort in terms of planning your progression as a character, where you want to go next, the types of stories that you want to be a part of as a player, the types of challenges that you want to put upon yourself, and your investment in kind of hearing someone's overall mastermind of a plot, and being able to kind of see that come together. That takes a lot of effort, and it takes hours every week, every other week, depending on how often you game. And if you aren't committed to the consistency of it, then you're ultimately going to have a much harder time being invested in the game, because it's just something that you do from time to time. But even if you still do it only once every 3, 4, 5 weeks, you get together once a year to play it for a weekend, whatever it may be, you're still investing a significant amount of time out of your day to work on it. So the ultimate goal is that you're trying to have fun. And again, because fun is so important, that's why I can't fault Jared. I'm not upset with Jared or anything like that. I totally understand where he's coming from. I had to put away the, I selfishly would love to continue doing this podcast with Jared. He's a very good friend of mine, and he offers great insight. He's, I guess a little mix of philosophical with tangential storytelling that he kind of loses track of where he's going and missing the subject. But he's got very good insight. He's been our GM for so long at our table. And I say he's been our GM because he is the de facto GM. Everybody has one at the table. You know who that guy is. Okay. You know that, in the DMD group, I know it's Scott. Scott's the DM. I know that Bill was the DM for a long time, but Scott's the DM as far as I'm aware for that group. And even if other people step up to the plate, he'll always be known as the DM. And that's what Jared is to us. Jared has always been the DM. He has been the director of our games, and he has been, instrumental in terms of shifting and evolving our game style. And, he's done it in ways that have been good and bad. And that's part of what the podcast was here to show is, what did we learn from 20 years trying to get to where we are today? And, maybe try to help you short circuit some of those things. And again, the podcast has always been more of a, going Pirates of the Caribbean here, they're guidelines. They're not, hard, fast rules. You're allowed to sort of experience the podcast, your own way. Take it with a grain of salt. We've done some controversial episodes. We've done episodes on cheating. We had done episodes on, subjects that I don't think people really think about as necessary episodes in some ways, in terms of again, talk about your feelings and where you're going and trying to be able to keep the cohesion of your table together. And I think that that's more of what we're trying to get to with some of the episodes, like what happens when you have disagreements at the table. It's about cohesion in the table, because you aren't playing with the character in front of you, you're playing with the player in front of you. And no matter how good you are as a thespian, or however you good are at role playing, you are going to take anything that is said at that table personally and to heart. And so when you look at it that way, you need to understand that, I'm appealing to the person. They're trying to translate that appeal into what their character sees as, the light in this world that you've created. And so everything goes to the player first, and that trickles into the character. I can't appeal to the character alone because the character has no soul without the person behind them. And again, that's why it's just really important to understand that when you're putting together a game, when we're putting together this podcast here, that we are, having fun. That's the end goal of the situation here, and it's hanging out with friends. We had a long conversation about everything that went on here, and it's true. If you don't enjoy the gaming experience, if you don't enjoy anything in life, you should not sit there, grit your teeth, and bear through it. I know we do that with jobs, and we do that in different relationships we have, and all sorts of other situations. But you really should be vocalizing and expressing at some point your frustration with something, because the truth is that your life is, well, long in the grand context of things. It is also short too. I mean, you do the hobby because you love it. You don't do the hobby because you're required to do it. And you don't game with Steve, Bob, Jessica because you have to. You do it because you love it, because those are your people. And they're able to provide you that escape and get away and be able to give you that thing that refills your cup and makes you happy. And so Jared loves game, and we're going to keep doing game, and I'm going to keep giving you insights from our game. But as a friend, he just didn't love doing the podcast. I think he really derives some joy from it. It always helped. He loves talking about game. He just didn't want to have to make that, his job. And that's really why he was stepping away from the game. It was just too much. That doesn't refill his cup. It takes from the cup. So, I wish him the best in that regard. And again, look at your friends, be willing to help them out. And again, because I said, we talk about that from the gaming perspective here. If you're noticing somebody at your table just isn't in love with the game, we talked about it before. Look at yourself. Is it something I'm doing? Is it the story I'm telling? Is it that person? And then have a conversation with them and see why they aren't having fun. See what you can do. And maybe the answer is, hey, we're good friends. We can hang out. But this isn't something that you're loving to do. Like, you don't need to do it. You don't want to force anybody to continue to do something that they don't want to do. That's just not, I like I said, I understand from a work perspective, you get paid to do what you do. You sort of have to do what you need to do to pay your bills, but that's a different, it's a different situation than with the gaming thing. You choose to game. You sort of are tangentially required to work. You don't have to, I suppose, if you really want to get, all into the nitty gritty with me. But no, what I'm saying though is just, look at your friends, make sure that you are fostering a good environment at your table, and always be understanding of what they are going through, and be able to have a conversation with them and be able to express hard things. This goes the other way too. If you're the GM and you hate the game you are running, you hate doing it, it feels like a chore to do the activity of being a GM or being a DM, and to tell this slog of a story that you do not enjoy, you as well cannot continue to do that, in absence of your own happiness for your players. So you do need to have conversations. And the whole point of the podcast, everything we've kind of talked about, is that you can tell games that are centered around what your players like and be able to interject your own flair and excitement into that game. Okay, that's the marriage of like the perfect games. All right, you can tell those over and over again, and you're allowed to experiment with your players because nothing is so bad that you can't do it once or twice. Uh, Things get real bad when you have to do them over and over and over again. That's when things get really tough and really bad. So, anyways, like I said, what's going to come next out of this podcast? What are we going to do next? Well, coming up next, I've got to talk to some other people that I know, maybe some other GM friends, see if maybe I could get a rotating co-host in here. It's not somebody who is strictly confined to, you got to do this every week on this day, blah, blah, blah. But instead, I've got other friends who are GMs who might be able to hop on and I would say have more flexible schedules than what Jared has. And I know Jared very well. I know what his schedule is like, and I know how difficult it was ever to, do a last minute recording with Jared, which is why we were always trying to build up a backlog. So the podcast itself should be more current in terms of the week that it's recorded and how relevant it is to the existing kind of conversation. So that's something that's going to shift with the podcast is that, if you ask a question that week, you should get an answer in the podcast that week. Before we had a bunch of episodes backlogged in case, things happened where we just couldn't, get a podcast out. I always had one in the wings to be able to provide to you. But, now we're going to kind of shift over this. And again, there's probably going to be a couple of musing episodes for myself of talking about different subjects. I do have a bunch of different subjects in the hopper for us going forward. But I'll see if I can find some other DMs. I've got a couple others, and I think some of them might be interested in hopping on, sharing their experience as a DM, and being able to offer that insight to you. And then, to you, the listeners, you are DMs as well. Your feedback into the podcast is invaluable in terms of being able to provide, content and your thoughts and, really kind of making this truly a DM. I wouldn't say just a DM-centric show, but a show about gaming in general. And so like, hey, I see this happening in my game, and this is how I handle these things. And so, again, we always talk about, you can send us anything at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll look it over, we'll read it, and we love answering questions and kind of going forward with that. And I still see Jared every week. So, I mean, I can pick his brain on any subject, and I will. And then I will transfer that knowledge onto you. So it's not like he's completely gone from the podcast here. If you're like, boy, I always want to know how would Jared have handled this thing. I can still ask him those questions, and I am going to ask him those questions. So if you send us an email, I'm going to provide you answers, not just from my perspective, but also from Jared in the podcast as well. I think he's too good of a resource to pass up for that. And, I'll probably pick his brain on future subjects too. So you'll always get a little flair of Jared. You just won't, unfortunately, have as much of the derailing nature of his storytelling that he used to tell. And then, I'm still growing as a GM myself, but, I'm going to keep providing, insight as I grow as a GM, and how I keep trying to level up my gaming. And you should have a pretty good sense if you've been listening to this podcast for a while about the style that I GM in. And I follow a lot of what Jared does. I'm not as good in. There's definitely areas that I need to improve to take my GMing to the next level. And I'll talk about maybe where I have my blind spots as a GM, maybe that'll be the next episode that we end up doing here. But then I will probably also offer more insight into our current games that we have going on, from myself as a player going into Jared's games. Or, if I am running a game, you'll get insight into, what I did that night. And, I can express to you what I feel are the, missing pieces in that story, and what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, and what the players are latching on to, and be able to give you a little bit of food for thought for trying to set up a game. And maybe somewhere down the line, when things calm down with Jared's life, maybe he'll jump on as a featured guest from time to time and be able to offer his insight again. And we'll get him on for some really fun episodes going forward. So that's going to be how the podcast is going to try to evolve here. This is going to be a shorter episode today. But again, it comes down to helping out your friends. Your friends are the people, hopefully your friends are the people at your gaming table. Hopefully you're friends with everybody there. And, be kind to them. You don't, there might come a time when they say, I can't continue to do, this hobby, or I can't continue to devote as much time to the hobby. Don't take it personally, because everybody has something going on in their life. But that's going to wrap up the episode. If you want to give any well wishes to Jared, or talk about maybe what you'd like to see out of the podcast going forward, contact me at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. We're also on YouTube, so smash that like button and review, subscribe, share with a friend, all that other good stuff. Content will continue to flow from this podcast, and we'll evolve this channel. We'll continue to evolve our gaming. We'll continue to level up our gaming together. But that's going to wrap us up for the week. So have a good week, everyone.